All right, welcome to another Player Acceleration podcast. And today we are going to talk about skill development and the continuous commitment to your skill development, the importance of that. Because a lot of players will play their entire season or the off season, and they'll have a specific training plan, or they won't have a training plan, or they'll just go on the ice and they have no skill development regime to what it is that they do. And I really fell in love with like just the whole idea of developing skill when I was working at the academy, actually, like seeing players working on their hands, working on their shot every single day, where it's structured into a program, which kind of led to the development of what we do in player acceleration. But uh, what's really cool is when players do have that dedication to developing specific skill. And when I say skill, like skill can be so many aspects of life. So when we're talking about hockey development, we're talking about stick handling, shooting, puck control, the game sense, hockey intelligence. But you could interchange any of these skills with piano, with guitar, with singing, with anything that you want in life, whether it's like developing a trade, being able to build a house. Everything that we do is a skill, and every skill can be developed, and every skill needs focus, repetition, and time to be able to develop the skill effectively. And it also comes in line with something that's called deep practice. And this is a term that I was introduced to a few years back, where if you think about uh, people who are driving on the street, like just like driving cars, and you look at a Formula One racer, and if the adage is true that it takes 10,000 hours to be able to develop or become a master at any sort of skill, or become a master at anything, then if you think about how many hours that we as human beings, well, above the age of 16, spend driving, we all really should be masters, because we spend that time on the road, or a lot of us do, whether it's in our jobs, or if it's driving to the rink, if it's driving across the country, spend a lot of hours in the vehicle. But when you look at it and you go down the street, or you're driving to the supermarket, not everyone's an expert driver. Like you might get cut off, you might see someone that's fallen asleep at the wheel, or whatever it is. And there's a reason behind this, is because there's something that's called deep practice. And when you look at a Formula One racer, or a NASCAR racer, or someone who's really dedicated themselves to the craft of developing the skill of racing a car, there's a lot of different aspects that can be broken down to it. If you've seen any videos of race car drivers getting prepared for the race, like they work on their visuals, they work on their body, they work on their reaction, they work on their ability to make decisions, in quick decisions under deep pressure. And when we're driving down the street to the grocery store, we just aren't. Like there's distractions that are going on. There's music that's playing. There's so many different things that are still happening. But a lot of the times we let our skills just go, and we won't actually focus on being intentional with our practice. And when we talk about developing skill, if you look at a hockey player, and the parent signs them up for all these camps and all this training, but the player isn't actually developing to a certain spot, it's not necessarily the training that is not making the player better. It could be, the responsibility could fall on the player, and not saying it all does, but it could. And it could in a sense of, if that player isn't having that deep focus and that attention to detail, that attention to really like, and desire to wanting to master the craft, the attention to if you're throwing a head fake, and you're supposed to use deception, and if you're supposed to look at the area that you're not going so that you can throw that fake to go around, are you looking at the puck? Is that a struggle for you? And because it's a struggle, do you continue to lay into the habit that you don't want to reinforce, or is it laying into a habit that you do want to develop? So when looking at skill development and the continuous dedication of developing a skill, I really like feel you need to have such a focus on having deep presence with whatever it is that you're doing, because if you don't, uh, then you're not going to get the full value of whatever it is you're doing, whether it's on the ice, in the gym, or doing doing a simple drill or shooting pucks. Like, yeah, and so I'd be curious to hear about even like the differences of what you've seen in players who do showcase that deep focus and that presence with their craft, even in the gym, in comparison to players that maybe on their phones during warm up, or maybe not really like fully there uh, mentally and even emotionally, but they're there physically.
Yeah, that's a this is a tough question because some people have the natural talent, and some people work a lot harder to develop the skill set. And I think it's a lot of what you said. It's just about being present and being mindful about what you're doing. What your movement is, what your skill set is, what the skill set you want to develop. And oftentimes it's like breaking a skill down into smaller components so that you can put it together with more flow, with more efficiency. So there's very many ways how to develop skills, and it really comes down to what your purpose is for for self-improvement. Like, what do you want to work on, what do you want to get better at, and then once then you can look at in more detailed, in more deep focus, what you want to change, or what you want to improve, or what you want to add in.
We've talked about purpose a bit on different episodes too. And I'd be curious to hear what you feel like an athlete when they're coming into their training. Say they're getting set up on either a skills program or a fitness training program. Like when they're looking at that, we can have any purpose that we choose. Like we get to choose what we focus on. When a player goes in deep, is that a very individual thing, or would you say like there are purposes that players can adopt to be able to like stimulate that focus rather than not?
Yeah, again, it comes down to what the intent is. So for example, if you have a coach that's trying to teach a skill, but the player's intent is not really to learn that skill because they don't feel the value of that skill when they haven't even really tried that new skill out, then they won't know if it's going to help them improve. So a lot of times it really comes down to what the purpose is. And usually people like to work on their strengths only. So they like to master the skill set that they've already had developed because it's a lot easier to do. So, working on identifying weaknesses is not something people like to reveal because it shows vulnerability. And then when you're vulnerable, it doesn't make it makes all your strengths maybe feel like they're not as strong anymore because you're just focusing on the weaker parts. But the way I see it is, those weaker parts make the strength stronger as well. So, it's a good balance of something. But to answer the question, I really do think it really comes down to what the purpose is for the coaches, what the purpose is for the athletes, but then also to marry those two together, because sometimes everyone has a different perspective on how the skill should be developed or how the program should be developed. And so it's important that everyone get on board, so there's a good balance there between opening up and learning new skills, but also building up on the skill set that you have as well. So it's recognizing the balance between the two.
A couple, well, one perspective that I've heard and began to adopt as a coach that I wish I would have had more as a player, is even having that purpose of growth and that continuous improvement. So meaning it's like whether it's going into a practice and about to work with a team, it's like what is an area of growth that we can have today, whether that's emotionally and physically, or as a team, like how can we grow together? Because sometimes it's like, say for instance, you're going into practice as a player and you're like, I want to become a better goal scorer, and like your purpose is just to get a bunch of goals. So whether that's on a goalie where he's not even in the right position to take a shot, it's just every single time you're shooting to score, which can be a very valuable thing. But if we look at the idea and the perspective of just like constantly growing, then that idea of like scoring can fit within that purpose. Meaning you're going into a drill and you're wanting to really say like focus on the specific details of the drill, knowing in the back of your head part of your individual growth right now in this point in time is to improve your goal scoring abilities. But maybe the purpose of the drill has to do with the forecheck. So if the coach is instructing you to forecheck and all you're thinking about is scoring a goal, you might not even execute the drill properly in comparison to having that presence and like really feeling inside yourself. It's like, how can I grow in this very moment right now? And what would that look like? Knowing that this is part of the skill that I want to grow is that goal scoring ability. And knowing that that will be taken care of as you continue that within your intention, because those opportunities will come in practice. And I really feel like when I personally have adopted that, and when I've seen different players when they're just like trying to dissect their game in a lot of different ways, not to the extent of where it's like diminishing themselves, but they're looking at their game and their play of thinking of, well, how could have I done that differently? Or what could have I done on that play differently? Could have I passed it in a different way? And looking back and being able to reflect on how you can grow in comparison to just like either being frustrated or just leaving it all off to the side and not acknowledging what has just happened in any given moment.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like, you know, like with what you said also, you know, when it's like it brings a question to my mind, like how do we identify what skill set to develop? Like what if not everyone's going to be a goal scorer? Like not everyone may be wired for that, you know, and maybe like that's the bigger question. Is I think really good coaches understand how to work with the player's energy and understand how to work with the player's play style, and can develop that, but also can allow them a space to expand their roles as well as a player, in case that's something the players are willing to step into. And I think and that's a skill set too for coaches to be at that level. That requires a huge mindset you know, awareness from the coach to be able to identify, you know, where they see a player could be and help them develop the skill set. But all in all, in my opinion, our skill set, you know, really comes from our passion and our desires and our dreams. And you know,
Mm-hmm.
if we believe we can do something, then we're automatically, the mindset is basically a list of tasks which we process things in order to achieve the action of what we're envisioning or what we're visualizing in our minds. So the mindset is like the bridge of that. The mindset's like, well, how do I translate that into physical action? How do I connect with my body? And then there's the daydreaming part, the visual part, right, too. So a lot of our skill set can come from, like, if you look at like some of the best athletes, they're so naturally good at what they do that they just are able to connect all of those things together, right? But if you ask them to break down the skills that they do, it might be a little bit more challenging for them because they don't see a skill set as individual pieces. They see a skill set as a whole. And so, you know, people have different ways of learning too. Some people need the whole to learn the individual parts, and some people don't understand how the whole thing works together of a skill. So they need to be kind of progressed one skill set at a time. So also recognizing that, and how, you know, how different players have different needs, and are, some are visual learners, some are audio learners, some use both in different ways depending on how the communication is too, depending on the choices of words used and the way the message is conveyed. That's the way the players receive that information too. And sometimes players, the way they receive information, that might not translate for them. So it's really also about communication too, and that, again, communication is a skill set as well. So how can we use communication to actually teach players to then develop their skill sets? So there's, like you said earlier, there's a skill set in everything we do, from driving to you know, working to playing hockey. Everything's got skill sets. Even how we study is a skill set. So, you know, I like what you said about the growth. Like for me personally, I feel the same way. Growth mindset. I believe everyone can be better. Like everyone can improve. Like there's no finite kind of limit to how good we can be. And so for me in my job and what I do is, I'm going to find ways to always help people improve. Now, it always, it's always easier when other people that I'm working with are ready and open to learning new skills, or to, you know, even saying like, you know, have you considered that your skill set might not be working that well, you know, and trying something else, or just, you know, trying it and seeing, because a lot of people will not change their skill set because it's their comfort zone. And so rising out of the comfort zone, if your desire to get better and improve is there, you're going to go into your uncomfortable zone. And if you have to learn something all over again, then you will. You know, I basically had to relearn how to walk. I had to teach myself how to walk properly again after my extreme knee injury about almost a year ago, where I wasn't walking for 2 months, and could have had surgery, but I healed myself, and I retrained myself how to walk, and I had muscles that were gone, and I had a skill set that was completely focused over the months of my injury on protecting my injury. So I had to change my skill set. And eventually, as my body healed, as my knee started to heal, I had to shift that mindset to a mindset where I'm capable. I can start walking. I can start putting weight on my leg. I can start, you know, doing small exercises and things like that. So I had to shift my mindset. And I believe mindset is a skill set. Skill set is mindset in action, really. And then mindset, ideally, if it comes from passion or the desire or the will, those three things are, if they're in alignment, that's basically what I think flow is when you're living the dream, it's called, right? You're living the dream because you're able to channel your mindset into your skill set. And a skill set is a set of actions that help you achieve your desired goal. So yeah, you know, it's you bring up some really good questions there, Josh, about you know, the growth mindset and how that can change that can add to skills. It's not necessarily about taking away, but it's about adding to. And sometimes it might require even unlearning and relearning as well, depending on the habits. If they're not serving you a purpose, you know, why keep them? Especially if you're, you know, if you're wanting to explore growth and become a better person, a better player, whatever it is you're endeavoring. Sometimes you have to shed some things that are weighing you down, that are really actually preventing you from getting better. And so, you know, now that I think about it, you know, even having an aware mindset, being mindful is a skill set. The term mindfulness that's a skill set that can be developed as well. And when we're more mindful, we can make more changes. And when we make more changes, we create more opportunity for growth, I think. So, yeah.
It's pretty interesting, even like your story of literally relearning like how to walk and going through that whole process, because like we don't think about how many things that we actually do on a day-to-day basis that are just unconscious, with whether it's walking like in itself. Like what a blessing that we have legs, that we're able to stand up, like coordinate with the muscles, like just unconsciously, and effortlessly, really. But like that didn't happen right away, like for any of us when we just popped out of the womb. Like we had to learn how to walk. Like I guess like there's some animals, like I would think giraffe can walk right away, but they have different innate abilities, and
Right.
compared to us, like
Mhm.
we literally had to develop that. And that's why we have our brains as human beings,
Right.
so that we can create those neural pathways in the brain to send those triggers. And it
And
must have been a
the good news about that example, Josh, that's a fine example you bring up, is that the good news is that all babies end up eventually walking. And the point here that I'm making is that babies never give up. You know why? Because babies don't have conditioned beliefs yet. You know, when you're a year and a couple of months old, there's the universe is a playground, and anything is game, everything is open, there are no limitations or barriers yet, so anything is possible. And so will an infant stop trying? No, their desire, their curiosity, see it's even if you look at it that way, their skill set, they're not thinking their skill set through as we do. As we become adults, we can, you know, logically think through it. They're not logically thinking how to walk. They're actually putting everything together holistically. So if they stand and they're wobbling around and then they fall on their butt, right? They're going based on feeling. They're going based
Mm,
on connection, right?
yeah,
And feeling is different, really. The emotional feeling and the feeling is different than kind of, you know, the logical part, which is analyzing how to walk, right? And it's the same thing with hockey. When we feel the game of hockey, we're flowing. When we think the game of hockey, we're slowing. We're slowing down because thinking is slower than flowing. Flowing is just all these calculations are happening automatically, and we're able to put all these individual skill sets together as a whole. And that doesn't require thought anymore. See, when we're learning a skill, and we want to break down holistic skill for someone who's struggling with doing it really well, then we break it down and they have to think of, okay, I do this step first, then I put this foot in next, okay, and then this foot goes where it goes here. And so that's like everything is slower with thought. You see what I'm saying? And
yeah,
so once they get the movement down and they repeat it a certain amount of times, there is a point where you can switch from thinking your actionable movements to what I call rhythm movements or flowing. And at that point, you're not thinking about what step to take next, but you're actually feeling the rhythm of how your feet are moving the way they need to move to achieve, you know, faster feet or agility, change of direction. So, you know, it's really interesting that way how we can break skills down. And then at some point, we have to link them together, and we have to let go of our analytical mind and go and switch to a whole nother mode of feeling and intuition, and really, you know, feeling the rhythm of our movement. And that's essentially dance's rhythm. But you know what? All sports are rhythm as well. And you can see players that are thinking, that are thinkers, they're more rigid, they're stiffer, nothing is really natural for them. But you know, the really good players, you can see things happen very natural. Like playing hockey is like a dance. They're just kind of flowing, weaving, you know, always at the right space and the right time, and the puck comes to them, and then you know it's flow. So that, and that's a skill set. Like you were saying, it's
yeah,
not just stick handling, is it? It's not just shooting. It's a skill set to have a tactical knowledge of the game, isn't it, Josh?
yeah. It's well, so there's different stages to it. So It's cool because as you're describing it, really it brought different things up that reminded me of what it takes to develop skill. And when you're talking about, okay, each and every single aspect, so the skating to the puck handling to the shooting to even walking as a child, uh, there's different levels to it. And I've heard it called the hierarchy of competence, meaning competence is where you really truly understand something. So the first level of that is unconscious incompetence. So that's where you don't realize you don't understand something. The next level is conscious incompetence. So a lot of the times that's where we're stepping on the ice and we're trying to pull a move that the coach is teaching us, and we realize we cannot pull that move yet, but we're conscious about our incompetence, and it sucks, it's frustrating. But when you realize you're in that stage and you can be gentle on yourself,
Yeah,
then you can grow through that stage so much
yeah,
quicker.
that's a very good point. Because frustration oftentimes, it shuts down parts of the brain that are responsible for actually learning and memorizing. We're in school or a skill in hockey. Like if you're literally with your coach and you're breaking down stuff and you're trying to put it together, any hint of frustration, but what you're saying is that being okay with being incompetent at the moment. Yeah, I wouldn't even technically, I personally wouldn't use that word. I would just
Yeah.
say, just being okay with learning, and because I think a lot of people see learning sometimes as failure. So if they're not learning something, they'll view it as they failed, right? Rather than looking at it as, no, I'm learning. I'm still in the process of learning. I will get this skill right now. I'm really struggling with this skill, but I feel that if I put a little bit more time and practice and I tweak a few things here and there, that I'm going to get it, and that's where starting from an easier skill set and going to the next skill set and to the next skill set after that comes from. But here's what's going to get you. Here's what's going to get you to the next level as a hockey player. It's not going to be your logical brain. Like
Yeah.
it's just not going to do that, because it's got to come from both. It's got to come from, like what you said, creating that space of no like not that pressure, not expecting it now, but because that's focusing on the result. If you focus on the result, then you're not going to be focusing on the process. And if you're not focusing on the process, guess what you're not focusing on? You're not focusing on the skills that you're supposed to be focusing on to
Yeah.
achieve the results. So it's a matter of shifting that focus, right? And that focus is being gentle with yourself. So you're totally focused on what you're doing. You're not focused on the result of what you're doing. And that, like you said, will allow for the space to be okay with it. Give give your body and your mind a few tries at it and keep going, without any expectation of when you should get it, because there's so many things happening here. And it's kind of like, that thing, if I had some advice to give hockey players that really want to get better fast, I would say, let go of when you want to get better.
Hmm.
Know that you're improving, know that you're working on your skills. But it's like kind of if you want to remember like something and it's like on the tip of your tongue, and the harder you try to remember it, the further you're pushing it away, and you're going, gosh, it's like right there. I can see his face. I know his name, but I can't.
Yeah.
And the moment you let go of the expectation of the result, your brain now starts giving you the information, because when you let go, you're actually shifting a part of your brain that's allowing you to recall the memory of the
Interesting.
skill, the memory of the person, the memory of the thing, whatever it is. And so, yes, what you said is very, very important, is that the space and being okay with that transition period where we're in that uncomfortable zone, where
Yeah.
we look like fools, like when we're falling down on the ice every single time. That means you're learning. That means that you're pushing the boundaries, and soon you will be able to monitor where that boundary is so that you can achieve that skill set.
So the frustration, what I've come to learn, just from studies and all that, is actually the myelination of the skill. So it's like there's that part, like every single time we develop a skill, like say it's picking up a pencil, there's a neural pathway that gets triggered in our brain that has holds that skill, that communicates from my brain to my arm to my hand to pick up this pencil, and that's a skill that developed. But when you're first learning the skill, or if you're relearning that skill and that neural pathway connection is cut off, you might miss the pencil. And that's like the frustration. But once you get it once, then that connection is made. You get it again. That connection is made again. You get it again. And every time you get it, there's this little thing called myelin sheath, that wraps around that neural
There.
pathway, that
Yeah.
that neuron, that connection, and it creates something that's called a superhighway. The more you do it at a faster rate as you get better and better at it, but it doesn't happen right away. You got to
Right.
develop it. So that frustration is actually the brain, like, working. It's getting better, and that's why I believe we can get so exhausted, even doing mental work sometimes, or emotional work, because we're actually reconstructing parts of our brain in ways that we don't normally use it.
Yeah, and that's another fascinating point you bring up, and that actually leads me to something else. And I'm not sure if this is related now anymore to the podcast, but it really, when you talk about strengthening the sheaths, the strengthening the neurons by rehearsal,
Yeah.
and rehearsal, so that it becomes, more automatic. It also reminds me of warming up. And a lot of players, will just go into the games. So they'll play hockey for playing the game. They won't train for hockey to play the game. So if you're not as excited to warm up for practices and games, then you're probably you're missing out, because you can go into a game, uh, you know, with just any kind of warm up, and still perform well. But if you want to perform even better consistently, taking your mind and your body through a proper warm up that does exactly what Josh was saying, to heighten the nervous system to the point where you are ready to go into the dressing room and get changed, that you have visualized your moves, that you have warmed up your skating stride, on the field, that you have done your groin stretches, that you have, warmed up your body in a way that is configured for you to hit up the skates, get on the ice, and just perform right away, like that. Then you're going to have a faster start to your game. You're not going to be starting the game hardcore, on in the second period. You're going to be starting it on the puck drop. So that's just another thing, really, adding to what you said. But what you said is, I think, the key thing there in the whole thing, really.
I love that. I really do love what you said. I'm gonna use that with my team actually coming up here. It's a really cool thing. Because we're in a situation where we haven't been able to get ice to practice, and we have a game coming up, and
Yeah.
some guys are probably kind of concerned and stuff, but being able to walk through a visualization before a game it can be just as effective as some practices for some
Right.
players.
Right. Exactly. And here's maybe how here's another example, if you don't mind me sharing just quickly,
Yeah.
an example of, what I was working on with some of my hockey players this last summer. Is what we were doing was, I had them basically on a balance board, which is a wobble board with a little circle in the middle, and it's like a teeter totter. And every time they touch the floor, basically the time has to reset and start from 0 seconds. And their goal is to balance on this balance board for 1 minute without tapping the floor once. So they literally have to keep this board with their feet on it level, and just do micro adjustments, because if the adjustments get too big and they touch the floor, the test stops and they have to try again. So my challenge to the hockey players was like, okay, I'll give you 10 minutes, and you guys each have stopwatches. You each have your own balance boards. Go ahead and let me know when you get to a minute. And so I was watching, I was just in the background. I didn't give any pointers. I didn't give anything. I just set them up, and they started going. They all got in their little zone, their place, and they started focusing, starting the stopwatch. And the moment they tapped, they would reset it and restart it quickly as soon as they got up again. But they had 10 minutes to do this. And it took about 10 minutes for them to get all the way to about, I think we had 38 seconds and 45 seconds, one player, and around there were the times. So it took a whole 10 minutes to get the mind and body fired up to almost get to a minute.
Yeah.
So then the story doesn't really stop here. Then a few sessions later, every session I gave them this test, and I took off more and more time. So and so they had less time to get to get a minute. So now all of a sudden the pressure was there because I'm reducing the amount of time. And to the point where we got to the last session, and it was like they had one try to get a minute. One try. Can you imagine that? One try. And I think only one of the players, out of the players, I think I had about 4 or 5 players, only one of the players was able to do it. And I asked him, I said, how did you do it at the end? And he said, I just flicked a switch on. And he said that all of that practice on the balance board, that rehearsal, which is exactly what you were talking about, helped me so much. So I took a lot of time at the beginning, right, of the first session, and it was so tough. And he also mentioned frustration. It was really frustrating that it took him so long to something he thought would be so easy. And then all of a sudden, he realized that, he really has to focus. He really has to narrow his focus and omit the distractions and dig down. And that's really what he's doing, is he's turning it on. He's getting into the zone quicker. And when you're in the zone quicker, the zone is where you play your best hockey at the current moment of what your physical capability is and your mental capability. That's the zone, is when you're exploiting the most out of your skill set and your mindset and your physical body, and everything's flowing. That's basically. And so he was able to flick the switch on, and that was my goal. My goal as a trainer was to be able to have players, and not everyone achieved this, just him, and the other players got better, but the frustration and the time constraint actually made them panic more, that they got worse results than at the beginning. And so then there's another step of, again, removing that frustration, being okay, giving yourself time, and not getting frustrated, and giving yourself more time again to practice, and then build back down to that kind of, that scenario where, hey, you have a penalty shot and it's game whatever 6 in the playoffs or something. You know what I mean? And so how are you? Are you wired? Are you ready? Are you wired to be fired? And that's, I think, really a huge point, adding to what you were saying also about the rehearsal and being okay with making mistakes, which I wouldn't even call mistakes. I would call it learning, a process of learning. Mistakes is for me is now a term used less and less. I don't see things in life as mistakes. I see them as learning now. So I like to replace the word mistake with learning usually. So.
Well, it has a much better meaning behind it to most people.
Yeah.
What I did want to do, though, I want to close the loop on something, because and it can have different verbiage, but I'm going to continue using it with the hierarchy of competence, because there were 2 stages that I didn't cap off here, because we talked about the unconscious incompetence. So that's when you're not aware that you're not that great at something yet, or that you're not aware that you can actually do something yet. The conscious competence is when you become aware that you're either not very great at it, or that you can't do it quite yet. The next level of it is where you become conscious and competent. So conscious competence is what it is. That's when you're aware that you can actually apply the skill, that you can actually start using it, you can actually start doing it. But there's actually one more level to this, which I find
What's that?
very, very cool. That's unconscious competence. It's when you
Okay,
become
natural.
un- unaware that you're good
You
at it.
can do it. You can
Yeah,
wake up at 3 in the morning and just do it, right?
yeah, exactly. It's like as long as your skates are on, you can go and skate. Like as a hockey player, you can normally skate as long as you've done the training, and you don't think about it as you're in the play. You don't think about bending the knees low, or you don't think about pushing out at a certain angle. But
Right,
there's depth that you can go within it. But those are the four stages: unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence,
right.
conscious competence, and then unconscious competence.
I
That's a
think
tongue
that would be
twister.
great to have on the as subtitles on the podcast.
Yeah, to just show up. I'll I think I can grab this image and just chuck it up for people watching the
Yeah.
video.
Because
Yeah.
that would be a good thing for people watching this video to actually see and to look at into further and to help them with self growth, with self expansion, self improvement. I think that's a really powerful awareness of to have.
Yeah, I'll get it up on them so people can see that. Um a couple of things that I did want to answer here, because I know different players at different ages will ask, like some parents will get really excited about their kids' development, and it's like, when is the proper age to start developing skill or focusing on it, and then what are the things to actually start focusing on. And I feel like this is very individual. I don't know about you, Jens, but when I see a player, like some players will be 6 years old to 9 years old, and they love the game. You can't get them off the ice. Like say it's you have a outdoor rink, and they just want to be out. They want to be learning. They naturally have that drive. But some kids, you got to drag them by their skates and chuck them
Yeah.
out there before they actually start doing it.
So the question is only relevant to those, or the answer is only relevant to those who ask the questions. For the kids that are out there doing it already, that the
Yeah,
parents won't even ask their question. They're not going to even ask a question like that because they're going to know, like they're going to follow the leash of their child. They're gonna be drawn with their child, and they're just going to support them and go, oh, they're already doing it. I'm not going to say
yeah,
no to their development at 4 or 3. They're skating at 3 around. Why would I say no? Why would you stop that as a parent? So it's important for parents to also know that, don't stop your kids. If your kids are already doing skills that you
hmm
see, and you see that as like, wow, this is amazing, don't stop it, encourage it. And so development can occur is always occurring no matter what age you are. Development occurs until the moment we lose this physical body. From the moment we are born, we can develop anything in any way. And so asking that question also, can be very, very limiting. However, I've gotten that question too, Josh, and I'd love to hear your answer. But I guess from my perspective, it would be like, when do you want to learn? When do you want to start growing? And that would be my answer to the question, is when do you want to start developing? Now, how you develop, like, for example, you're not going to give a 6-year-old like strength training or something. You're going to work on stuff that is related to their age of development. So at like 6 years, they might still be learning their gross motor skills, which means they still might be tripping over stuff. They still might be learning how to bike off of a curb, like, which is quite a big challenge for them at that age, because they can bike on a flat, but so that's a new skill for them, right? So they're still getting used to just basic things at 6-year-olds. So it's about recognizing, and some kids will be able to do jumps or even little wheelies at 6. So it's about recognizing where your kids are at and being okay with where they're at and seeking development for them at the level at they're at, and whether they're a bit behind, if that's what you feel, or if they're far ahead, then get them even further ahead. So just keep supporting your kids. Support your kids always with what they're doing, and you'll know if the desire and the will isn't there. If you're having to tell them, to push them, then you know you can find something else for them to do, and find other skill sets that they might be more naturally interested in engaging in. Because the best way to learn is through passion. If you have to force your kids, like try forcing your kids. How often does that work? It never works when you force your kids to do something they don't want to do. So the best
Yeah.
way they learn is when they're excited about something. So if you can see that as a parent and encourage that, even though it's something that you might not choose yourself, it's not your life. It's not your life. You have your life. So if you want to do something, you do what you need to do in your life, and you let your kids develop in the way they want to develop, even at a young age, even if it's not what you think is relevant for them. It's not your life. It's that for them to explore.
Because if you do the opposite, you'll probably end up doing more damage in your relationship than is a benefit. And that's what's really important. We're human beings, and we have a soul. We're a soul in a human body, really, and we have like a purpose in this life. And when we connect with that, that's when things feel a lot more joyful, a lot more flow. Now, when
Yeah.
a player is getting older and they're getting above, like, say, to like that 13, 14, 15 and higher, different things become priorities, whether it's social media, uh, video games. And that's where those conversations need to be had of what is actually healthy, because and what is a player actually wanting, because at that point in time, yes, the competition is getting stiff. And if you think about, if you're going up in a camp against a guy that lives 500 kilometers away from you, but every day they are shooting pucks,
Mhm.
they're working out their hands,
Yeah.
they're going to the gym, there's going to be a difference there, and the repercussions are going to be whether you make the team or not, whether you get picked or not. And it's just the way that life is. There is an order of like, if you play video games and are on social media all day long, not to say you can't have balance in life, but then make no time for your training, then you're not going to get like the results that you would have hoped for. So you got to take ownership over that result, no matter what, and understand it's like, no, I just didn't put the time in because I didn't
Yeah.
like it. But then it comes to that question again: why didn't you like it? Was there something else that you feel more inclined to do? Is hockey's not the be all end all for everybody. It's a huge thing in Canada here. Like, there's so many sports, there's so many arts, there's so many different things. So these same
Yeah.
things that you learn in hockey, or that we're talking about here, about skill development, they get applied to business, they get applied to sales, they get applied to singing, they get applied to architecture. So many things like this, what we're talking about, can be applicable. But that love and that passion that does need to be there, or else like you're just trying to build a house on sand, not on cement.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point.
um but if a player is doing that stuff and they are passionate about the game, and you've recognized that as yourself or as the parent, um you like you want to train as, like, almost as often as you can without having that burnout, to the point of like, you don't like you don't want to get to a point where you fall out of love with the game. And
Well,
I think
and
that,
that's the thing, is that people, when people play out of passion, passion is infinite. Passion is unlimited. You don't burn out when you're playing with passion. You burn out when your expectations exceed your passion, or when your frustrations exceed your passion, because frustrations, negative expectations, or judgments of yourself or others, they're life sucking. Passion is like, I have all this energy. I want to get up today. I want to lace my
yeah.
skates up. How are you going to be burnt out from that when you want to get out of bed, when you're hopping out of bed? And so again, that in itself is a skill set. How you get out of bed, how you talk to yourself in your mind will reflect on how well you learn. Because when I'll give you an example. When I get up out of bed, the first questions that I ask myself are, who am I going to meet today? And you know, what kind of situations am I going to find myself in? Like, what am I'm opening myself up to receiving that which I'm looking for. You know, which
Mm,
amazing people am I going to look for today? How can I be of assistance today? You know, how can I compliment someone, or how can I do something? Because I want to be a positive person. So what I'm doing is I'm opening up my mindset in the morning so that I can, you know, not go based on my reoccurring habits, of which could be potentially negative, right? If it's unconscious. So I'm bringing consciousness to who I want to be and
mhm.
how I want to live, and I'm letting that passion come through with questions, or with things that I want to see, with intentions, questions, and then when you go through your day, you begin to see the things line up in your life. That in itself is a skill set. It is the skill set is the routine. What do you do in
Yeah.
the morning when you before you get out of bed? Do you just get out of bed you know, hurrying because you're late for school? Well, you're going to be in a state of stress, in a state of panic. And guess what? The rest of your day will be aligned according to how you got up. That type of energy, and then you'll forget things, and you know, you'll feel like you're behind. You'll feel like you have a lot of homework, all because that's the energy you woke up with. Now, if you don't like that energy, you have to change that energy. And to change that energy, you have to sit still and say and reflect on, okay, yesterday I just got up, and yesterday was not a good day for me. But today
Right.
I'm going to change this. I don't want to feel stressed. I don't want to feel like I'm running behind. I want to be prepared. Just
Yeah.
saying those words, I want to be prepared today, will make you think of everything that you need. And all these other thoughts will come in. Like, oh, what if I created a task list? Okay, well, let's write down some things to do. Okay, let's act on those tasks. Okay, one step at a time. What's next? Okay, cross it off, next. And as you move through your day, now you're going to feel a sense of achievement. You're going to feel a sense of efficiency. But the day before, because you just kind of got out of bed unconsciously and just you knew you had to get up, but you didn't prepare yourself with intent and with intention. So that's a skill set too. So Josh, we're not just talking about developing like hockey skills. We're talking
Yeah.
about also developing mindset skills, right?
Life skills.
Life
Like,
skills.
yeah. Like, you reminded me of when I've well, when you introduced me to the book Conscious Health, and when I was 17 years older, or maybe I was a little bit younger, but some of the habits that I learned even from that book, I just do unconsciously now, whether it's like
Yeah.
waking up and just the lemon water
Mhm.
every single morning. um like, there might be the odd one when I'm out of lemons, but lemons is like at the top of the list. And that, like, at first I needed to remember I gotta get lemons, but now when I don't have it, it's kind of, it's
And
not that I'm
why do
out
you
of,
do that? And why do you do lemons and water? What is your reasoning? So people watching
yeah.
this understand, well, why is this so important to them?
Well, because your body can either be in an acidic or an alkaline state. If when we're in an acidic state, that causes like more stress, decay, it's hard on the body. When we're in an alkaline state, it's more harmony, more positive, like even emotionally. It's very healthy for the body. Like, literally, like, there's what is it, bacteria and different ailments cannot,
Viruses? Yeah,
viruses cannot actually live within an alkaline state.
right.
um so after I learned that, I was like, well, if it's a simple thing, I of like drinking a glass of water, but now just squeezing a lemon in it, it's been transformative, like transformational. Even as I get more years on my life, it's like I don't feel like I'm aging because of it. Like, it's and I
Right.
didn't think that was going to be a thing. I did it for energy in hockey, and that habit is now just like, it just happens. I go outside, like, going outside is the other thing. It's like getting that fresh breath of air, not being just coddled in the house, but making sure the body is moving a bit first thing in the morning. Like, that habit, that skill of a routine, of healthy habits has been developed, and now it just happens like unconsciously.
Nice. Yeah, I like
Yeah.
that. I do the lemon water as well. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, now I do celery too. Not
And
every day, but
celery, yeah,
yeah.
and carrot, and beet, and okay, that's another podcast right there.
The last thing that I want to go over is now that we've talked about like the habits, we've talked about the skills that people can develop out of these habits, or hockey players can. It's really like identifying too is what areas should a player be training and developing, because when someone's passionate about it, like you can go in so many different directions. And my belief around a hockey player is that you need to be very well rounded in your training, like work on many different aspects. But you also need to know the aspects that you need to train on, or else if you just think I got to get a better shot, you're just going to work on your shot every single day, which is an aspect of your game. But I think when you imagine, and it was like what we were talking about before of developing skill, because there is like every individual is different. Like, do you focus on the broad picture of things, or do you focus on the minute detail? And I feel like it can be described in a metaphor as the alphabet. If you think about how you learned the alphabet and how the alphabet has like at large, there's 26 letters, goes from A to Z, or Z in the States, and every letter has a different sound to it. When you're taught it in school, the teacher writes it, you write it, you might sing it in songs, you might hear it, you might feel the emotions when you're singing those songs, you connect with those different senses. But we look at it, you learn different parts, like you might learn the first five, and then the second five, and then the third five, and then it goes on. So in hockey, you look at the game as a whole, like you got that 200 feet by, was it 80 feet ice sheet, there's a red line, two blue lines, the goal line, the net, the circles. Okay, what do players do on that ice sheet? And part of that is understanding game sense, patterns on the ice. So knowing the game at large, which is one aspect of the game. Then you look at the player itself, the individual. So fitness is a huge thing. You gotta be like healthy and fit to be able to play on the ice. Now, what aspects of that? Like that comes to your skating. You can develop your skating even off the ice by doing simulated skating, things that can replicate those movements with different drills and exercises. Your hands, you can develop your hands in so many different ways. And even like you see players like lifting the puck up, doing the Michigan, like getting so creative with it. That's evolving. But knowing the fundamentals, like stick handling in front to the side, having that range of motion so you can expand your reach with the puck. Shooting is an aspect of it as well, knowing different shots, slap shot, wrist shot, snap shot. And just being able to be a student of the game, studying players that you're really drawn to, or that you want to be like, whether your position's defense, your forward. And now watching highlights, watching games, and trying to break down those motions and recreate those motions on and off the ice, because you can do what you do on the ice, off the ice, as closely as possible. And those motions gets triggered in the brain, so that when you go on the ice, you can try it out. But not everyone has a luxury of having an outdoor indoor rink at their home. So you got to be able to get creative and still practice those in your environment, but then bring it to the ice after. Because if you're fearful of doing it on the ice and are at that consciously incompetent stage, that's a great place to be. But you got to push through that fear, break through it, so that you can come out the other side and start moving up to that consciously competent stage, where you can start to actually do that and practice that in the game, because that can take time to develop. But it doesn't happen unless you got like that, well, got a set on you to be able to actually try out some of those stuff.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, well said.
Cool. Well, unless you got anything else you want to share, Jens, I think we can cap it off there.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in to another podcast, and we will see you on the next one.
Thank you, guys.